Dear Earthmates, we are visiting Lviv in Ukraine, which is under aggression, unfortunately under invasion, but resisting bravely. And Professor Myroslav Marynovich is welcoming us, and he has already done 4 interviews today. He's very busy, extraordinary days, tragic days. Professor Marynovich is the Vice-Rector of the Ukrainian Catholic University. Lviv is a city a lot of people admire. I unfortunately wasn't able to attend the PEN Congress there. Dear Professor Marynovich, thank you for accepting this invitation. And
thank you for inviting me.
Now, where would you like to start? I mean, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Let me use my experience as a Gulag survivor to reflect a bit on the deep spiritual reasons, roots of the present war. Where it comes from. And for me, we have to come back to Yalta, to 1945 Yalta Conference that made an immense injustice, a double standard in evaluating the criminal behavior of 2 totalitarian regimes. The Nazi regime was publicly condemned, while communist crimes were kept hidden for security reasons and were never brought to account, legally or morally. So the official European narrative of history became one-sided. The Nazi regime was considered the ultimate evil, while communist crimes were considered, I don't know, a Slavic aberration of a potentially ideal concept, that of communism. And in other words, who cares that might be some dark spots on the external, excellent external facade of communism. So this is very important conclusion for me, because later on, all these crimes of the Stalin atrocities before World War II started to be blossoming again. And I was part then of persecution of dissidents, other persecution of just people who wanted to live free, to be free. But then now we have the situation that sooner or later, that clandestine evil had to emerge as the seed for a new world conflict. So for me, the present criminal regime in Russia is the fruit of these seeds. Thus, the long forgotten communist crimes are beginning to pulse through current European history. And today they have matured into new tragedies. And you probably see all these tragedies on TV screens. So in my perspective, as long as communist crimes and now Putin's crimes are not acknowledged, brought to justice, and finally repented for, any hopes for peace and reconciliation are futile. So in my vision, the 21st century can be successful if it brings all the 20th century accounts to a close and doesn't allow them to poison our world today. So for some people, it may look very theoretical, philosophical, but for us Ukrainians, it is very practical idea, because we see that for Putin, Stalin is still a hero. Putin is modeling his regime, having Stalin's regime as an example. So to say how to solve this issue, so I'm sure that Russia has to pass through a total catharsis. As George Weigel, the American observer, religious philosopher, recently stated, Putin's Russian regime is a danger to the Russian people and the world, and will likely remain so until the kind of moral and historical reckoning that took place in Germany after World War II takes place in Russia. Maybe some of our listeners today know such a Russian intellectual as Yuri Afanasyev. And Yuri Afanasyev was even more resolute. He said, should such a Russia be saved with the despotism of the authorities, where the individual and the majority of the population have become the object of repression? My answer, so the answer of Afanasyev, is no. We need to save, but not that Russia and not this regime. We need to change the paradigm of Russia. I totally agree with him. So this goal might be achieved only through the moral reckoning of the Russian nation that will lead to its liberation. And this is a very important moment, because I see now that many Europeans try to find an easy way. Look, Russians are good people. They suffer also. Just let's go to peace, forget about everything, and let's live normal life again. We will not achieve this goal, because Russians, in the majority of them, do not understand the level of evil they created. So they have to see that evil, go through moral reckoning, and only then they will be ready to enter their future, as it was with Germans in the middle of the 20th century. This is the issue, the general picture of the reasons of the war and the question of Russia. Now, I know that many people in the West suggest that this is a local conflict between the two brothers. Many Italians, for example, ask me, what happened? You were brothers. What happened with you? So they do not even understand what Putin announced publicly. First, that there is no Ukrainian nation as such, that Ukraine is a part of Russian nation, and all those who do not agree with that are fascists and Nazi. So very simple. So if some Ukrainians do not obey commands from Russia, then they admit that they are fascist, and now the Russian army is legitimate to kill them totally. And it was repeated several times publicly. So my question is, what is the role of Western media? Why it was not known for every European, not only for politicians, but for every European. So now the vision of Putin is still imperialistic. He wants to have Ukraine back to Russian Empire. The reason is very simple. Kyiv, our capital city, the center of our culture, the center of Kievan Christianity. So the Christianity in Moscow was borrowed, so to say, from Christianity in Kiev. So for Russia, Putin may leave alone Estonia, Georgia, but Russia cannot exist without Ukraine. So that's why Putin went va-bank. He put all its treasures on one card. This is the victory in Ukraine. But as you see, the crimes, the war crimes committed by the Russian army are so awful that the world has nothing but recognized that Putin's regime is the essential, existential evil. It's not just bad guy, we will have to negotiate with him and so on. Nobody negotiated with Hitler after burning Jews in, how to say that in good English, you know, after Holocaust. Nobody negotiated with him. Now Putin is committing genocide in Ukraine. You are Ukrainian, you don't want to obey my rule, you are the subject to be killed. So now the very important question arises before many Europeans, many people in the world at all. We know the dilemma, security versus values. Too often, people are willing to preserve peace, to preserve their safety, and at least at some point, they are ready to sacrifice values. But for me, this is an awful mistake. Probably some people know the famous phrase by Benjamin Franklin, Americans. Those who are ready to give up essential liberty to obtain a temporary safety deserve neither liberty nor safety. So exchange, put the word value instead of safety, you will receive the same logic. Those who are ready to give up essential values to obtain a temporary safety deserve neither liberty, neither values nor safety. So for me, this is very important message to all our Western partners. Please defend values, because in this case, we will defend all Western democracies. We will defend values in the world in general. So what else? Let me say a little bit about our Ukrainian society. It consists of numerous small, unstable associations, which are quite difficult to manage centrally. During our 30 years of our democracy, all our governments have some problems in managing the society. In its normal state, Ukrainian society is very chaotic and diverse, and it is difficult to consolidate it. But as soon as one big goal emerges, for example, to organize a Maidan or win the war, a real miracle happens. And all these diverse centers instantly consolidate and acquire one vector of action. And this happens not because of the will of one autocrat, but because of the internal resonance in the whole society. This is exactly what happened now at the beginning of the Russian-Ukrainian war. And the whole world, and even Ukrainians, were really impressed. Maybe some of you know the famous words by the British analyst James Sherr. He said that in Russia, there is a strong government and a weak civil society. In Ukraine, on the contrary, there is a weak government and a strong civil society. So that's the reason why our both societies are evolving in different directions. The Russian society tends to evolve towards authoritarianism, while Ukrainian society tends to evolve towards democracy. And I believe, of course, let me finalize my introduction to the following point. Yes, I am absolutely sure that Ukraine will win. As a former political prisoner, I have been to a prison at the end of the 70s, when Brezhnev regime looked very powerful. But we, political prisoners, being there in detention, we smelt the agony of the Soviet Union. And actually, the Soviet Union finally collapsed. Now we see Putin, powerful man, he considered to be the second strong army in the world and so on. But I smell the agony of Putin's regime. Why? Because Russia is using three instruments of evil: lies, hatred, and violence. I suggest that people in your audience are people of a humanitarian perspective of life, and they know the value, the role of values. And all these three elements of evil just mean that I cannot believe in the future of the country that uses these three elements of evil. So that's why I suggest that evil might win many battles, but it will never win the war. And the second conclusion made in a prison, and now that is very valid. We cannot expect that the evil will stop itself. Evil has to be stopped. So that's my conclusion. Thank you.
A striking approach and summary. Thank you, Professor Marynovich. Unfortunately, lies, hatred, and violence, we are suffering from them in Turkey as well, in other countries. And you are right, we need to defend the basic human values. And in 1977, let me clarify my position. From the start, I've been doing my best, like many people like me, to stand against the Russian invasion, focusing on Putin's autocracy and imperial desires, just like some people in Turkey want re-Ottomanization. And this all sorts of imperial goals are harmful, terrible. I was born in a semi-developed capitalist country, and we suffered from the US organized military coups. And we who criticize capitalism, we have been suffering a lot. My position has been anti-Stalinist, while also trying to move beyond capitalism, beyond American US. So it's not an easy position, but and in 1977, I was expelled from a small party because I said the Soviet Union should also be criticized. And my grandfather was the first thinker and writer that I knew. And in 1977, he said to me, at the time of Brezhnev era, when the Soviet Union seemed to be strong, he calmly smiled and said to me, the Soviet Union will collapse. And then he explained, any regime that does not allow opposition is doomed to failure. 50 years, 60 years is a short time in human history. And he was right. When you mentioned Brezhnev, the Brezhnev era, I recall that. I still respect Marx's criticism of capitalism, the profit mechanism, etc. And I still have the ideal of transcending capitalism and classes, but we cannot do it without the basic human values, without democratization, deep democratization. And these are together. And I think democratic capitalism is less bad than despotic socialism. I mean, if we have to choose, I have to admit. I hope I'm trying my best to contribute to this ideal of democratic socialism in the world, whatever. Not easy, easier said than done. But as you say, basic goals, basic values, and solidarity. Professor Marynovich, you are an essayist and also an educator. What is essay for you, and why essays?
Yes. My personal story of essays was started in a labor camp, and it was very interesting because some writers who were also imprisoned liked my appeals very much, and they started to convince me that, look, your style is very good. Why don't you write your creative works? And I liked this idea. And because I was full of religious reflections at that time, I wrote my first essay. It would be difficult to translate because of the cultural difference. Gospel according to God's fool. I'm not sure that you know this word, God's fool. No, it's famous in Russian, Ukrainian literature. The idea of a person who is crazy enough to tell the authorities that they misbehave. Let's say this.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Mm-hmm. And it was very important essay for me. And I may say that starting from that point, I wrote many essays later, but my main ideas were concentrated in that first essay, who was written in Gulag, in a labor camp. And for me, let me formulate my main goal with these essays. Again, historical moment. In 1988, when I was released and many political prisoners were released by Gorbachev, 3 former political prisoners, including me, had conversation about our future, what to do in these new realities, perestroika, democratization, what is our place there? I rejected a political career totally. It's not for me. I'm not against politics, but it's not my way. At the same time, I understood that I have to be active, and I formulated my own task. I do not believe that Ukrainians, after the communist period, after the communist trauma, are able to build a totally new society because they have an old schemes, old patterns in their mind. So in order to enable the nation to build a qualitatively new country, we have to change those patterns. And my goal was to change the mentality of people. So I use my essays to change the mentality of Ukrainians, to break down the former communist stereotypes, and to train them in building new forms of society.
I see, very important. In Turkey, after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire, as you know, Atatürk tried to, actually it was a successful, to me, political and cultural revolution by focusing on science and arts and gender equality and secularism and putting a distance between traditional Islamic law, etc. You know, great people like me owe a lot to him, and unfortunately, his cultural and legal legacy has been under attack in Turkey. Now, when we say essay, of course, Montaigne comes to mind automatically, doesn't he? And what would you like to say about Montaigne?
Probably I will not have a special, my personal opinion about, I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
He dared to think autonomously. He attempted, and that was something important, of course. It's always important. Unfortunately, it seems a great majority of the people tend to simply obey certain given categories, and few people criticize and try to invite other ways and means of doing things. So you spent almost a decade in prison?
Yes, my sentence was the following: 7 years of imprisonment in labor camps and 5 years of exile, so 12 years. But I spent 7 years of imprisonment totally in labor camps and 3 years in exile in Kazakhstan.
In Kazakhstan.
In Kazakhstan. So it was an idea of Gorbachev to release all political prisoners by that time and to show the West that the Soviet Union has no political prisoners anymore.
I see. My wife, Hüsnü, and I, we visited Ukraine in 2013, and we visited Kiev and Odessa. We also visited St. Petersburg and Moscow, and we are deeply saddened, of course. We trust that fairness, justice will prevail. Yes, Ukraine, and in Turkey and elsewhere, it's important to fight against pro-Russian craziness. That's evils. They say all kinds of crazy things that you know. Anyway.
By the way, no, this is very important to understand that, yes, we understand that many structures in Europe were oriented on Russia. During several decades. I have nothing against Russian nation. Well, this is European nation, and according to my understanding, God didn't create a criminal nation. No, regimes are criminals, and but nation has their own responsibility, not to obey the criminal regime. But what I want to say, I understand why there was orientation on Russia, but now we see that it meant automatically that Ukraine was treated as a troublemaker. Or Ukraine wants something that violates, that put the system, security system in the world in question, put in danger. So the world was not happy with Ukrainian independence. And we felt that the world would be happy if Ukraine is back under the Russian control. And it was so simple to negotiate with Moscow and to have the whole big territory controlled by Moscow. It's very simple. But now this picture is not valid anymore. So now the world understands that Ukraine is being transformed from a troublemaker into the possible elements of the future security system. Because we do not have a crazy ideas to conquer somebody or to dominate in our part of the world. No, we want to share our European future with other nations, to live in peace, and so on. But we also want to defend our freedom. So, sorry, I interrupted you.
Very important. No. It's interesting. The United States, the White House strategists have been supporting re-Ottomanization in Turkey. Why? Because the parliament of Turkey resisted against the US invasion of Iraq through Turkey. And then the United States didn't want that. And they said, we'll take care of that parliament. And now, if the parliament is pushed aside, it's because of the US strategy. And similarly, the US wants one person empowered in Turkey, so they supported Erdogan, who will gradually get rid of secularism and turn Turkey into an Islamic regime. Therefore, with Israel, there will be a pro-US situation, and the US will control the Middle East also through Turkey. So that is why the US strategy has been against democracy in Turkey. So that is one of the major things. And in the Ukrainian situation, you have just explained something. Yeah. This is, of course, most anti-democratic. And my personal relations with Ukrainian culture, apart from visiting Ukraine, I performed in a play by Bulgakov, in his play Against Stalinism, Molière, in Istanbul. And I kind of dared to a little bit rewrite Gogol's Inspector. And also my Turkish composer friend, Selman Ada, and I, we have written an opera based on Gogol's Clock. So these are, and now with this violent attack against Ukraine, more and more people will focus on Ukrainian culture and rights. Yes, Ukrainians today are not only defending Ukraine, you are defending the future of humanity at the same time. We are on the same side, we are on the same boat. It's not that we should help you, no, we are, there is, to me, there is a world war. Actually, I call this the, if the Cold War was the Third World War, after the Berlin Wall, there has been, that until recently, a Fourth World War when the US became dominant. And now we have, with Russia and China, this multiple polarity. I think there's a Fifth World War going on, and every spot in the world is also within the territory of this world war. So we have good guys and bad guys under different nationalities. It's really as simple as that. You are also a member of PEN, Ukrainian PEN, and I'm also a member of PEN Turkey, and we are with Olha Muha, we have been collaborating. How about the university, by the way, that you're teaching and the Vice-Rector? What is the situation there? How are the students?
Well, you mean what is the situation now during the war?
Yes, in your university.
Yeah. Well, it was a frustration for all Ukrainians, including for our students, because suddenly these young people became a generation of war. It was totally frustrating idea. I could never imagine that it will happen during my lifetime, but it happened. So at the beginning, we tried to, of course, all lectures stopped, and we organized our students who remained in Lviv. We organized for volunteering, for receiving humanitarian aid, repacking, and sending to the east of Ukraine. So it was our main activities, plus, let's say, information war. Many students used their foreign contacts to explain the situation, to explain the Russian aggression, and so on. I liked that moment in our history. As I told you, that horizontals are very important in Ukraine. It means that every person immediately understands that he has to be active, he or she has to be active and immediately find some field of activity. And it was the case with our students. So for some time, they worked in both fields. But then when we understood that the war will be probably, will take longer than we expected, we understood that this generation cannot be a lost generation. That these students cannot lose the chance to receive a high education. That's why we negotiated with our students, and at some point we returned to lecturing on Zoom in a distant form. And it is going now. We are lecturing. The system works. Of course, there are some losses. There are some students who are now refugees in some European countries. So it's not all the time they may join the lectures. But in general, the system works, and we are very glad that we help this generation to, how to say, to preserve their chance to receive higher education.
Wonderful, wonderful. And what would you like to suggest to young Earthmates?
My request is, please help us to finally destroy the invisible Berlin Wall. Ukraine is independent for 30 years, but the wall is still present. Many young people in the West do not understand what are Ukrainian youth, what is their dreams. So what is their world? So my appeal to young Turkeys, Turkish people, to young people in other countries, please include Ukrainians into your network. Treat them as equals, not as troublemakers. And because I'm sure that not only Ukrainians will benefit from that, but
everybody.
Young people, everybody will benefit from this content.
Wonderful. Is there anything else you would like to add, Professor?
I would like to thank you for this meeting.
I and many other Earthmates are thankful and will be thankful. We are together. I enjoy saying that. We are together. Yes.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining the Earth Civilization Network. We'll be stronger together. Our synergy will be better. Thank you so much, Professor.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.